the timelines are changing. September of 2025 is an extremely important month. It's a 9 month in numerology in a 9 universal year, and that only happens once every 9 years. So here's a psychic forecast for September of 2025, as well as the psychic forecast for autumn. And I had a very stark vision of large waves being propagated off the Pacific Northwest around the Cascadia subduction zone, axial seamount area, maybe off the Aleutian Island. But it was a vision that large waves were propagating outward, tsunami waves. So, prayer warriors, your job is to prove me wrong. And I've seen it time and time again. When enough people pray, usually the prophecies pan out, but to a much lesser degree. And the worst case scenario is not doesn't happen. I've seen it time and time again. So let's do this. And also, I've been shown a crack in the desert, like an earthquake crack, maybe around Arizona, maybe a new fault lining in Arizona, but September is a number 9 month in numerology. Nine is about completions and endings, so it's very important in that regard. So this will be a month where it'll be the end of an era, basically, and the beginning of a new era in humanity and on the earth. So this is extremely impactful. What happens this month is going to have ripples far into the future, and it's time for us to really be in our power, to raise our vibrations, and that'll help humanity to grow. And things have to end. Things are not exactly fair and just in the world. And there's been corruption that's been propagated through centuries that's coming to a head, and it's starting to come out more. And this month, this number 9 numerology, it's also about energy and action. It's really very conducive, as well as the astrology, of opening up these fields of awareness so more people recognize it, so that positive changes eventually happen. So there will be important disclosures and there will be important disclosures around corruption in politics, like the election frauds, not just the last election or 2020, but ongoing and in other countries also. Epstein cover ups, AI agendas, COVID agendas, unconstitutional acts that take away our freedom, and more. And did I say COVID agendas already? I did. Okay, more and more cover-ups are going to be exposed, and will mark the beginning of global reform. Basically, changes in the U.S. presidency and other presidencies and rulerships around the world will likely happen. So let me dive into Donald Trump for a little bit, because he's so in the news. He's pretty much the most controversial and influential figure on the planet. So no psychic forecast would be complete without discussing him, basically. So changes in U.S. presidency are likely, but could this be the end of Donald Trump? So we'll talk more about that in a psychic forecast. My pre-election predictions were that he'd get elected, he'd get inaugurated on time, but that his presidency would not last more than 2 or 2.5 years, basically. And but threats to his presidency will come up in September. That's already happening in August. That will potentially shock the world, basically. Health, as I've been citing for close to a year now, is the number one reason why. And recently we've been seeing more on the internet and in other areas about his health and changes in his health. And I don't think he's dying, by the way. So there's a little spoiler alert. But let me go back into my notes. So health, as I've been citing, is the number one concern. Now, does he have congestive heart failure? My dad passed of congestive heart failure. I see the signs, possibly kidney, liver issues. Earlier, I thought maybe he had a mini stroke. I mean, we don't know, because we're not going to find out. Remember Ronald Reagan? They didn't even let the public know that he had Alzheimer's disease or JFK. So things could be going on. And I had a vision back in May where he was motionless in a hospital bed, basically with a lot of IVs and stuff. And I believe, I have no proof of this, but I believe that right after that, it was on a short and on a YouTube video in early May that he dropped off of social media for about 3 days, canceled some events. He may have had a pacemaker put in then, because when he came, or some procedure, because when he came back, he was frail, he was tripping more, he was less clear. All that stuff was coming up. Again, we don't know, it's just conjecture, but that was a very strong vision. Something happened. So let me go back into the notes. A lot comes up on social media, so let's break it all down. So we had the vision in May. Um, so we got that. You know, uh, presidents, things like that aren't disclosed. However, to put things into perspective, Donald Trump's still traveling. He's still holding meetings. He was in Alaska. He's still keeping a very high paced schedule from I am seeing. Again, we're relying on mainstream media, and that doesn't always go so well. But that said, that's what we're seeing. We're aware that though that he does have the ankle swellings, the bruises on the hand, and all of that stuff. So basically, to me, I do feel like there are health issues that are not being disclosed, basically. But to me, it also appears to be overstated at this point. So it exists, but overstated. I don't think he's dying at this point. But also watch out for another assassination attempt, more likely October, November. Mental decline comes up a lot. Again, putting into perspective, he's been talking in circles and saying crazy things since before 2016. Yeah, I could see maybe a little bit more advancement, but truth be told, when I'm working a lot and I haven't slept, I don't function as well either. Probably you don't either. So again, let's be aware of this. There's something going on with him. There could be some signs of mental decline, but let's not get all polarized by the media. One of the advantages of being nonpartisan, basically, I don't like both sides of the political divide, truth be told. So I'm not on Trump's side. I'm not on the Democrat side either. And that's the advantage of not having a side. You can see things from more of a neutral perspective. Something's going on, something that we need to keep an eye on. But it could get worse as the month goes on and into October. So that's something to keep in mind on. And as I'm talking, I'm feeling my chest. I'm a medium and I get signs in my body. I think there is something going on with his heart, and we're going to find out mid to later on. My dad worked till he was almost 90 with advanced congestive heart failure. So again, keep it in perspective. Also, other things going on, extreme pushback from both parties, as well as international pushback, executive orders, deployment of the military, the National Guard against U.S. citizens. All of that stuff is getting highly questioned and highly scrutinized. So there's a lot going on. Energies of September will increase the revolutionary activities, the pushbacks, the demonstrations, some violent, and all that stuff. I also had a vision of a peaceful protest with the National Guard or military or police invading it and arresting citizens for no reason. So just a product of the changing currents in our society and more people becoming aware, basically. So my original prediction for Donald Trump was he wouldn't last the full term. I'm very confident that that's going to turn out accurate. There's definitely a chance, and a window of opportunity, if you want to look at it that way, that later this month or into October that he could be stepping down. Health remains the number one concern, but there's a lot of pushback. I don't get it clear. Like, I haven't had a specific vision enough for me to make that my official prediction, but again, timelines are very variable. Of course, even though I'm nonpartisan, it affects me a lot, so sometimes it's harder to get clarity. But for right now, I'm sort of leaning towards him maybe getting through this period, but I would not be surprised at all. And in fact, part of me does see him having a lot of problems that could lead to a dismissal later in the month or September. So anyway, so sum it up: September, October, crucial, and there's a real chance his dismissal could follow soon after. But either way, I don't see him serving a full term. Now, there's a spiritual side also, as he's a reflective or manifestation of our collective consciousness in a way. If you understand how consciousness works, you might see that also. So basically, what that means is that once enough people evolve and more corruption gets exposed with the system, and perhaps corruption around Donald Trump himself gets exposed, once that happens and the purpose is served as this part of our awakening and our increasing awareness, that's when Donald Trump won't be in power anymore. So if you're not liking what you're seeing, remember, resistance leads to persistence. So just try to be open and accept what is. Do what you can to change things, but don't resist so much. Okay, I think we got that point. So remember, psychic predictions and visions are based on the now and projected into the future. So as we change the now, we can change some of these outcomes as well. So I have one or two more snippets on Donald Trump and the psychic forecast, but I wanted to jump in to the other big story. That's 3I Atlas. That's the comet or interstellar object that's entered the inner solar system now. I remote viewed it 2 weeks ago, and the results are in a separate video, which I'll flash above for you. And now that science is uncovering more, it's actually validating a lot of what I picked up in that remote viewing, giving me more confidence that that was inaccurate. It was extremely powerful when I came in. There was such power. It was hard to hold it, but I definitely got some information for you. I felt like it was alive, some form of life anyway, that we don't understand. Or perhaps as an interstellar traveler, it just gathers so much information that it felt alive to me. But it felt like it was alive, like it had consciousness to me. Call me crazy, but that's what it felt like to me. So maybe a rogue space traveler, like a comet, with qualities of consciousness or life also. Now, it could be a probe from another intelligence, perhaps extraterrestrial in origin, but I don't believe it's an alien craft. I did not get that when I remote viewed. I don't believe it has hostile intention or any of that. I think it's gathering and receiving information, basically. It's got a plasma coma that's growing as it's coming more into the atmosphere and interacting with the electrical circuitry of the sun and inner atmosphere. It's growing to about half the size of the sun. That's the plasma corona, the dust halo around it, with its visible corona now about twice the diameter of the Earth. The object is likely larger than what NASA's saying. Last I heard, they're saying it's about 5 kilometers. I believe it's closer to 50 kilometers. That's a big freaking space rock, basically. To cut to the chase, high energy plasma with carbon-based gases are producing crystalline structures like diamond within that, and that can generate its own luminosity. So it doesn't have to be a power source. Just chemistry and physics alone can explain that phenomena. Developing crystalline structure may be capable of transmitting and receiving information from our solar system and be bringing information to us from the outer galaxy, or actually it's the inner galaxy that it's coming from, and star systems in deep space. Its large plasma field, and this is important, will interact with the sun, the solar system's electrical circuitry, yielding increasing solar flares. We're still in solar maximum. Plasma ejections from the sun, which in turn increases geological volatility here on Earth, as well as atmospheric amplifications feeding storms, cyclones, which is another word for storms, and other weather. So expect more high-end M-class to double-digit X-class flares with coronal mass ejections, filament ejection, more volatility in the sun affecting the energy of the earth, the electrical, affecting the outer atmosphere, the magnetic sphere, the ionosphere, which in turn affects the stratosphere and the troposphere and affects the earth. It changes the electricity on the earth. It creates more coronal holes. It creates more influx of energy, which excites the energy, the electrons and protons, the plasma in the earth. And more activity means more release, more geological activity, and there you have it. Some more atmospheric disruptions to communication. Large regional power outages are on the table, especially second half of September into October. Stronger hurricanes likely with a backloaded hurricane season. I think we see more activity after the September 10th peak than before, and that can include two strong systems that affect the U.S. One could be East Coast and Northeast. I feel like the Gulf also, Florida and that area. Also, unusual autumn weather in August that I predicted actually in June when I did the summer psychic forecast, the weather part, as well as in the beginning of August. So I predicted this trend to cooler weather basically in the U.S. here, especially the northern, central U.S. and the eastern U.S. But there's other changes around the world sort of lending to an earlier season and a more severe winter coming in a lot of regions. So also, let me get back into my notes. And we're likely to see like this continuation of shots of Arctic air coming in into the second week of September, mostly in the northern plains, the Midwest, but also partly in the Northeast before we get into a little bit of a milder regime. But I also think towards the end of September, we're going to see unusual snows, like say in the northern New England, the Adirondacks, the northern tier, and stuff like that. And that's going to lead to more nor'easters than we've seen in a lot of years and more polar vortices. But we'll get to that as we approach the autumn. Some more weather extremes, floods, fires will affect us this month. So besides the Pacific Northwest, several areas around the world will be subject to increased seismic and volcanic activity, which will likely increase more later in the month and in October. At least one major earthquake approaching or exceeding 8 magnitude likely in September. Here in the States, the San Andreas could yield a 6 magnitude plus earthquake in September also, so keep an eye on that. The New Madrid fault around the Mississippi near the Carolinas could also see a 6 plus magnitude earthquake. More likely October through January, but timing, especially in geological events, is hard to pin down. So keep an eye on that. Have a plan ready just in case. Be aware, not scared. And again, the more positive energy we bring in, the less likely the severe outcomes are to happen. The earth has to change. Geology has to happen. Weather has to happen. But it's also a reflection of consciousness and all the stress in the world. So the human consciousness affects the earth consciousness. So if we can change that, and it starts with ourselves and our groups and communities, that can smooth out. Geology has to happen. Earthquakes have to happen as long as tectonic plates are moving and all that stuff. But it doesn't have to happen in the most populated areas. It doesn't have to happen in ways that are going to cause mass suffering. And we have limited but some power over that. And the more we pray or raise the vibrations and do grid work and energy work, the easier that transition will be. So also I had a vision of long lines in gas stations and a lot of panic. So watch out for possible gas shortages or supply line shortages in the month of September. September 21st is United Nations Day of Peace. It's also a partial solar eclipse right on the world axis in astrology. Also, heavily aspecting the 4 outer planets. This is huge with the numerology, astrology. This is a huge juncture that's going to lead to a lot of changes. I'm like seeing a crack in reality, for lack of a better word of saying that. So this is going to create huge changes in global politics, economy, and governments, which will follow this event over the weeks and months to follow. Tentative peace deal for Russia, Ukraine can be reached around that time, but until then, fighting continues. Hopefully that'll lead into a more permanent solution, though some resolution with Gaza and can happen sooner than later. The conflict continues. Netanyahu's tenor was being shown as threat to me, and again, health and pushback may be part of that as well. Lots going on in the world. I've got more of that in the longer video, which I'll share in a second. In general, global conflicts increase, but so do peace movements, underground organizations, and stuff like that. Also, they're showing me a lot with cyber attacks and stuff like that. Some of that is on purpose to perpetuate agendas, to allow more AI to enact more surveillance over your bank accounts and transactions, as well as other activities. So keep an eye on that as well. This month is a purging month. It's that 9 universal month. And burns out, and it's born out of the increased awakening in the collective. More people are awakening, therefore more purging of the old earth that's corrupt, that's built on power over others, and rather than power back to the people and freedom and sovereignty. So this number 9 energy is great for purging. Good to clear things in your own life that are repetitive patterns or shadow aspects, but that's also happening on a collective level, basically. More news and evidence as well around extraterrestrial sightings, direct contacts, all that stuff. So I'll probably at some point in the next week or two do a separate video just on that, because there's a lot to unpack with the extraterrestrial intelligence that have been with us for a very long time, since the beginning, that recognize that we are in an ascension and we're in a period of human evolution. So they become more active in guiding, not interfering, but guiding our progress, basically. I also got a vision of new hospital beds using AI and other monitoring devices to monitor patients' changes in their vitals, to kind of fill in the gaps that nurses and doctors can't cover, especially when hospitals are understaffed and there's too many patients. So these are already available. They may be somewhat akin to the Tesla med beds that you've probably been hearing about, but I do believe we start to see some rollout or more news about these more sophisticated devices, early detection, diagnosis, stuff like that could be akin to the Tesla med beds, frequency and auric mapping and healing and stuff of that nature. Also, with all the controversy connected to Donald Trump, etc., watch for the smoke screens. The media is very good at diverting our attention. So if everybody's worried about Trump, his health, the craziness, if you consider crazy, whatever, the executive orders, the outbursts, all the stuff that's drawing our attention, I believe a lot of that is really by design, that what we see is largely a show, and a lot of the decision and activity happens behind the scenes. So while all that's happening, there's more satellites. They're building that AI network that's going to be really part of the internet. So every time you go onto a site, you'll be screened. You have traffic lights, face recognition, all that stuff. Big Brother is watching more and more, so don't get distracted. Keep an eye what's really going on, what they don't want us to be aware of, basically. And it's all part of Project Stargate. And that's just a small part of the September psychic forecast for you. I have a lot more detail in the video that I'm going to post right over here for you, and that will include more predictions, dozens of more predictions, more details on this prediction, and the very important numerology and astrology that you need to know, because the more you understand how this energy is working, the more you can be prepared, the more you can take advantage of the potential benefits. So thank you. I hope you found this very helpful, and I'll see you at the next video. Namaste.